As we saw in the title, Don't Become Fluent in a Language, it sounded stupid. You could even ask, what do you mean, Octavia? Why make a video with a heinous claim? You aren't some polyglot YouTube or with 1,000 languages under your belt. And to that, my friend, I say you are correct. It does sound stupid, and I have written this script many times before to capture what I mean by stating this. That don't become fluent doesn't mean you are incapable of understanding or even speaking the language you're learning. For my case, it is with Portuguese. Although it isn't the first language I am learning, it is definitely not going to be my last after installing important expectations on myself in what I wish to learn. I am a bit of an autodidact, and there's a good chance that all of us are. What it means is we teach ourselves something that isn't the traditional way. For my case, Portuguese wasn't a language I traditionally learned from school. Unlike Spanish, which I am advancing after 2 years of learning it in high school, with additional help by my commuting with those in my city, perhaps it's easy to say that you need to access to class or people who speaks it to be engaging. I honestly agree as well. Otherwise, I would not have been learning so fast from it. However, from my experience, school focuses on the grammar of any languages. It is useful for me when I'm understanding the basics such as conjugations, past tense, present, and future with Spanish, and never was I placed in the level where learning what gender articles are, nor had the worst accents for someone who only picked up after years of pressure to learn, but there was still some sense of imposter syndrome knowing I could be considered a native speaker, as I adopted it long before from my parents. I felt discouraged to not be able to translate 50 pages of different legal documents at the age of 7, and I'd been bringing my learning down many times by people at school. Some being raised and spoken to know most of what they mean completely. And I felt completely jealous when I was compared to my friends who were supposedly taught by their parents. Turns out they weren't taught from English to Spanish. In reality, they simply made conversation while mine didn't. Whenever I asked to be taught, they made the excuse of not having time. It let me down with only my identity as a Latino who felt entitled as to learning as fast as possible, but to also not seem stupid while learning it as my own. That task was difficult for me. And before high school, I only went through this app called Duolingo where I first attempted to learn. And after 2 weeks of pure learning through it, it wasn't productive as some people may say online. Now, Duo doesn't help. That app sucks with zero real life use to it. ¿De qué colores querías para tus patos? El rojo y el marrón. Es café, mija. ¿Por qué no aprendes en la escuela? Then there was school. I hadn't learned the grammar rules until sophomore years due to my incredible course of music class, but when I was there, it sure felt like the most humbling experience ever. Nobody was perfect, but neither was I. Sometimes it felt embarrassing knowing my level of Spanish wasn't the best, especially doing poorly in the placement test in the beginning of class. The term no sabo felt like an insult to anyone who is Latino, so for me, it felt like a remark of embarrassment when being asked that. It marked back to my fear that was in me. From the time of discouragement that's disappointment in trying to learn, and after facing the obstacles and judgment from getting it wrong, feeling like I was in square one all over again, until I had some cross a valuable lesson the classroom was trying to teach. That the class wasn't meant to learn how to speak Spanish only, that's obvious. Obviously, it's going to teach you how to speak Spanish, but instead, it also mentioned that it's about how to become an effective communicator. It wasn't a life changing quote that could be vaguely used on a YouTube video on how to learn languages, but it did made an expectation for me that could be understandable and possibly taken by hearing this. Because for me, it not only made me realize it's not about fluency when learning a language, knowing every word, every grammar rule in mind, possibly alliterating the entire book of The Great Gatsby by a writer named Fitzgerald through that language. It was to instead be able to use it day by day, have some engagement, feel connected to others, importantly. Because after grasping some understanding in Spanish, I met my girlfriend, Sophia writes. She and I didn't learn anything from each other yet when I was improving communication in Spanish, but later on we got close. We made an exchange to learn our native language. To be fair, I said I was a native speaker by technicality, but that was from being able to use somewhat speak with my parents, but hadn't had close connection with anyone else before high school, except with her when learning Portuguese. And with her speaking Spanish with me now, I don't mind being personal in my point of view, so I will only make it brief with how learning was with her. Not sure if anyone heard this quote, but comment down if you did. If you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. If you talk to him in his language, that goes to his heart. It's by Nelson Mandela, but it sums up the experience of what it was like being capable enough to learn basic few phrases that then helped me be able to compliment her with Yo te amo con todo mi corazón, yo quiero te abrazar, mina lindina, and later on to have been able to written a letter in that language. It felt great. Sure, it not be may not be the most easy to learn as many language, especially coming from a background where I have been ridiculed and didn't know how to have responded at the time, but now I felt like I had learned beyond knowing a language. I learned a deeper part of me that I had wanted to express through other means beyond the words. I already know what I mean is that sometimes the communication is more important than the mechanical parts of learning. For me, wishing to be able to think and feel freely is one thing everyone wants to reach when learning a language and can mistake it for fluency, especially for me in the early stages. Trying yet failing when doing so, it didn't stop me. It instead pushed me further to have continued learning, practicing, gathering my experience to keep going. I show off a bit with what I know to some people, because nothing's more funnier than saying phrases no one can understand or possibly remarking a mere curse or expression that have clicked right in the heat of the moment, and then they ask you, "Are you fluent?" And I would say, after my time and efforts putting all my focus on what I enjoy learning and connecting with those who speak it more deeply, no, because I found myself more free to have embraced that and reached to this conclusion of mine where learning became stress free and useful than to have wasted my confidence in fitting what myself and the world consider fluent.